What if I could give it back to you? Pluck out the pain and give you another life. One you could never imagine.
I can swap this life of shame. Swap it out for a dark gift and a power you can't begin to imagine.
If I leave you here, you die. Or you can be young always, my friend.
Be all the beautiful things you are. And be them without apology.
I know that a lot of people have been waiting for another video on Interview with the Vampire. The issue is, I don't make videos unless I know that I have something to talk about. Actually, I'm thankful to some of the comments that I've received in the previous video, some of the negative ones about the show itself, because it gave me the opportunity to actually write this other one. So today we're gonna do a deep dive, stripping the show to its core, to its essence, going back to the source and understand why the AMC's version has been one of the most successful and powerful adaptations that we ever seen from novel to screen. As a vampire, Louis grapples with a painful paradox. Though he has gone beyond mere human mortality, he remains bound by the racial hierarchies of his world. This fundamental shift in Louis Carter's motivations expand upon Rice's original themes, weaving an intersectional identitarian narrative showcasing how oppression operates and persists beyond any individual evolution.
Thank you, sir. It was the call and response of my entire life. I had let them talk to me like that so long, I stopped hearing it. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Subject-verb agreement, sir. Smile, nod. Yes, sir.
A character's motivation is the key to making them feel real. It's what gives them depth and makes their journey resonate with us. When a character's motivation is superficial, they become nothing more than a hollow archetype, a surface-level concept of what a person could be, rather than a fully realized individual. True character depth comes from motivations that are complex, personal, and emotionally grounded. Rice's decision to portray Louis as white in the antebellum South in the original novel bypasses the historical realities of slavery, thereby situating him as a mere alienated moral philosopher rather than a beneficiary of structural violence. In contrast, AMC's adaptation firmly positions Louis as a black man within a racialized context, forcing him to engage with his environment and endure the consequences of historical oppression.
Get your hands off me, nigga!
Louis's decision to surrender to vampirism stems from what he perceives in Lestat, an unrestrained, self-possessed man who moves through the world with utter confidence.
I wanted to murder the man, and I wanted to be the man. I had come there for Lily, but I left thinking of only him.
But Lestat's freedom is not just a personal trait, it's a privilege granted to him by the society that surrounds him. His audacity is not challenged, it is allowed.
Out catting with some white man out here.
He ain't white, he French.
Oh, that's a new kind of white, is it? French white?
During their fateful encounter in the church, Lestat ensnares Louis with the seductive promise that as a vampire, he will finally wield true power. Because so far, despite Louis' business acumen and wealth, he's still subjected to continuous racial microaggressions, and it becomes clear that the other business owners will never accept him as one of their own. While Lestat is looking for a companion, Louis mainly consents to the vampiric transformation for what he believes vampirism could grant him, which is liberation. As Shanaitla aptly puts it, however, something both men didn't consider in this moment, Louis due to his grief and Lestat due to his ignorance, is that despite the fact that their vampirism and queerness has brought them together, they still will never be equals due to their difference in race.
I got in that coffin on my own free will. In the quiet dark, we were equals.
White master, black student, but equal in the quiet dark.
Very quick stop to the video to inform you all that I made a buy me a coffee profile thingy. I also put the link in the description below. Let's go back to the video. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, which formed the conception that we now have in modern representations of vampires, they are neither living nor dead but undead. Similarly, race is not static nor something that can be erased. It lingers. The transformation into a vampire pushes Louis further into duality. It transcends human racial and social limits, but his identity as a man of color remains a visible marker of difference. Unlike Lestat, who exerts his vampiric dominance with impunity, Louis is forced to carefully balance his powers with the racial constraints that linger, even in his undead form.
I tried to persuade the city council. They said it was short-sighted at best.
This tedious Negro, still clinging to his Creole heritage like a life raft.
We're all hurting.
These damn teetotaling types, too.
This tension exemplifies the Bois' observation that people of color possess a double consciousness, always aware of how their actions are perceived within oppressive structures. The Bois' concept of the veil from the souls of black folk provides a crucial lens for understanding Louis's identity as a black Creole man in the Jim Crow South. According to Du Bois, the veil represents the way black individuals navigate duality, how they see themselves and how they are seen by white society. Louis embodies this tension in multiple ways, experiencing the complexities of upward mobility that never fully liberates him from racial discrimination.
Did you sell me the azalea because you knew this day was coming, Tom?
You put a sir on the end of that.
This duality becomes even more pronounced after his transformation into a vampire, which grants him immense power, but cannot fully detach him from the historical and cultural baggage of his blackness. His veiled identity becomes a metaphor for the inescapability of race. That's why it's very interesting how instead vampiric transformation in Rice's mythology alters the very essence of the newly undead. Vampires in the series take on an otherworldly beauty, ethereal, with skin that becomes almost alabaster, explained as a physical manifestation of their immortality. This transformation effectively serves as a narrative device to explain Akasha's pale complexion, yet it also reinforces a deeper form of erasure. By stripping her of the racial features that would anchor her to her cultural origins, the story sidesteps the need to engage with characters who exist within or respond to a racialized world. In doing so, the text enacts a form of symbolic whitewashing, severing Akasha from her heritage and reshaping her into a figure that aligns with a more universally recognizable Eurocentric aesthetic, which is not at all uncommon even today. Lestat views vampirism as the ultimate gift, an offering of power bestowed out of love. In his eyes, Louis's true self is not found in the roles he struggled to maintain, but in the vampire that he could become. However, Lestat's perception of vampiric power is shaped entirely by his own lived experience, that of a privileged white man. In this way, he exemplifies the white savior industrial complex, positioning his gift within a framework that, while well-intentioned, is inherently flawed. Lestat genuinely believes he is granting Louis agency and strength, yet his actions rest on the misguided notion that Louis can only access real power through him, and by leaving little room for Louis to express his vampirism in a way that reflects his unique struggles and lived experience. Lestat views racism as an oddity, something foolish, but only in the detached, condescending manner of a predator who sees all humans as little more than sustenance.
They were your brothers and sisters once, but now they're your savory inferiors.
His cultural detachment adds a compelling layer to his relationship with Louis. For Lestat and other ancient immortals, racism is a fleeting human concern, one that holds very little meaning in a world where the only real distinction is between vampires and their prey.
Oh yes, but you merely provided them the excuse. So as I said, toss them into circumstance, they go for the throne.
And that's why you and me ain't ever gonna work. That's why you're always gonna be alone.
To him, the divide that matters is not racial, but existential. Vampires exist in opposition to mortals, and any divisions among the latter seem trivial.
Maybe I'm just pondering what I am.
For the infinitesimal time, you're a vampire.
Yet, Lestat's inability or refusal to engage with Louis's blackness in a meaningful way breeds a growing disconnect between them, one that is reflected in basic communication between the two.
But you need to show restraint, Fledgling!
You need to stop using that word right now, because it sounded a little like slave. Well, that's what it fucking sound like. It's what it feel like sometimes.
And the carousel comes around again.
Fuck you.
The fracture between their perspectives is laid bare when Louis kills and publicly displays the mutilated body of his business associate, a man who had led efforts to push black business owners, including Louis, out of Storyville. Lestat misinterprets the act as an expression of Louis's acceptance of his vampire nature, failing to grasp that it was not just the violence of a predator, but the retaliation of a black man asserting his power in a world designed to strip him of it.
I didn't do it for me. I did it for my city, my people. Destroy our businesses and buy the land for cheaper. Know what they're doing.
Louis's act of violence is stripped of its broader political and social implications the moment Lestat reframes it as an expression of personal pleasure.
You did what you did because it gave you pleasure. Companion of the dark gift, finally.
By individualizing and reducing Louis's actions to pure self-indulgence, Lestat erases any motivations or assertions of power that have to do with the collective or community, instead portraying them as a moment of hedonistic surrender to his vampiric nature. Immediately after, Louis rescues Claudia, seeing in her an opportunity to become the kind of savior Lestat once was to him.
I could not save the Azalea. I could not save Storyville. I could not save the aunt on the wrong side of the wall, but I could save her.
In his mind, saving Claudia becomes an act of redemption for his perceived failure to protect Storyville and those within it. I discussed this part of Louis's motivations in my previous video on Interview with the Vampire. However, his attempt at saviorism also mirrors Lestat's in a crucial way, which I haven't discussed before. He too isolates an individual from their suffering. This reflects Cole's critique of the white savior industrial complex, which highlights how Western interventions in marginalized communities often focus on rescuing select individuals rather than dismantling the structure of oppression that necessitate their suffering in the first place. What makes Louis's attempt even more tragic is that, unlike Lestat, he is physically unable to complete the transformation himself. He brings Claudia into his and Lestat's home, but it is Lestat who must ultimately turn her. Louis's inability to enact this transformation underscores in the show his continued lack of agency, not only within his relationship with Lestat, but also within the broader system of racialized power dynamics, whereby the whole turning affair mirrors a reproductive process of sorts. While Lestat clearly doesn't personally hold racist views, he benefits from and perpetuates a racist system.
I performed as his valet, walked a pace behind him, took his overcoat once we found our seats, remained standing in the back of the box until the lights went down, and only joined next to him once the overture had begun.
This reflects a broader issue in discussions of racism. Many individuals in our society fail to recognize that participation in a racist system does not require personal racial animus. As scholars such as Eduardo Bonilla Silva argue in Racism Without Racists, systemic racism operates independently of individual prejudice, meaning that even those who claim to be colorblind or personally unaffiliated with racism can still perpetuate structures of racial inequality. Lestat embodies this contradiction. He does love Louis and he does believe in his freedom, but his inability to recognize how they operate within an oppressive framework prevents him from truly understanding Louis's struggles.
Some things you don't get about America, Lestat.
Yes, let's have this conversation again.
Colored, white, Creole, French, queer, half queer, mostly queer. What is it?
Becoming a vampire did not merely strip Louis of his humanity, it severed an essential part of his cultural identity as well. His transformation isolates him from the black community of Tremé and distances him from the social fabric that once defined him. One of the most compelling aspects of the show is its refusal to frame blackness as a burden or a curse. From the very first episode, the show establishes that being black is not solely defined by struggle. It is also about love and community and joy and cultural richness. This is a refreshing departure from narratives that often depict Black identity through a lens of suffering alone. Louis, despite the racial oppression he faces, is not an isolated figure. He is deeply embedded in a familial and cultural network that nurtures and defines him. His family, though imperfect, is a source of warmth and connection. This depth of cultural belonging makes Louis's transformation all the more devastating. Louis's vampirism forces him to navigate an entirely new kind of exile.
Grace. Grace.
Get out!
His struggle to fully embrace life with Lestat is also clearly about the loss of his Black community. As a vampire, he is estranged from the roles of brother, son, and uncle. His Blackness remains, but his ability to participate in that life is stripped away.
Never gonna have a family of my own, am I? No sons, no daughters.
I'm your family, Louis.
This is where Lestat enters, finding Louis at his most vulnerable at the funeral of his brother Paul. Grief-stricken and isolated, Louis becomes susceptible to Lestat's seduction, not merely in the romantic sense, but in the existential promise that the vampiric transformation offers. These patterns aligns with historical and psychological understandings of predation. After all, vampires are predators. When societal support systems crumble, when one is cast out or alienated, that is when people are most at risk of being manipulated.
I could not join the transformation of those in attendance. He would not let me.
Come to me.
The show complicates these dynamics in ways that the original novel did not. Because when Louis ultimately succumbs to Lestat's offer of vampirism, it is not just a story of seduction or power. It is a story about the devastating impact of compounded marginalization. Claudia also serves as a reflection of the identity Louis has struggled to hold on to since his transformation. In the novel, Lestat uses her transformation as a means to emotionally tether Louis to him, a form of vampiric entrapment. The show reimagines this moment, shifting Claudia's introduction into the narrative so that it directly tied to Louis' violent retaliation against the racist of Storyville. This narrative change deepens the thematic weight of Claudia's presence, making her arrival not an act of manipulation on a lover's part, but a direct consequence of Louis's confrontation with racial oppression. Their bond is not simply that of maker and fledgling, but of two individuals who share a common experience of racial otherness. Their silent, telepathic communication, something Lestat can no longer access, becomes symbolic of the real-world dynamics of Black cultural expression, which is often thrived through coded language, shared historical memory, and community solidarity.
Did he make you too?
He did.
What's she saying?
He has to rely on my words to understand me, just like a human.
I'm not human no more, am I?
No, you're a vampire.
I can see where this is going.
In this sense, Louis and Claudia's relationship mirrors historical examples of Black resilience, where the ability to foster communication and understanding beyond the reach of white dominance becomes an act of survival. And this despite Louis and Claudia being fundamentally different and approaching vampirism in completely opposite ways. While Louis grapples with the existential weight of his new existence, Claudia embraces her nature with the same pride and certainty that defines Lestat.
Who was it that she takes after?
Claudia in many ways represents what Louis would be if he were to fully embrace his new nature, something that he does at the end of the second season, but she also serves as a reminder that their shared Blackness still shapes their experience in ways Lestat will never comprehend. Lestat's inability to fully grasp the significance of their bond introduces a quiet but profound tension. What fundamentally distinguishes Claudia from Louis is the specific forms of power that they seek. Claudia yearns for physical maturation, a development that her immortality permanently denies her, whereas Louis desires the kind of power Lestat once promised him, though his understanding of the power has evolved. Initially, Louis saw power as something he could acquire through wealth, influence, and social mobility. By the time Claudia enters his life, his focus has shifted. Now, instead of looking to Lestat as the source of his empowerment, he finds a new sense of purpose in Claudia.
I used to get low, caught up in human affairs.
Then what?
Then you.
Yet Claudia's journey is markedly different from Louis'. Unlike him, she was never given the choice to become a vampire. The power that Louis accepted and later discovered to be deeply flawed was forced upon Claudia, stripping her of agency before she could comprehend what was happening to her.
I remember the night I was made, the fire choking me. You carried me out through the flame and the smokes. But then why'd you take me home? Why not a hospital?
Barely breathe.
But I was breathing.
The moment that crystallizes this realization for her is when she accidentally kills her human lover, only to be dragged by Lestat to witness the gruesome aftermath. Here, Claudia experiences a turning point in her perception of power. For the first time, she fully grasps that within the confines of this vampiric family structure, she is powerless. She is in effect a child indefinitely trapped under the rule of men who dictate the terms of her existence.
But I'm not your child anymore. That's rule number 5. I'll be your companion, your sister.
If she wants to reclaim any agency over her life, she must seek it outside of the familial unit, independent of both Louis and Lestat. Despite Louis and Claudia bond, and despite they both resist Lestat's authority in different ways, they have fundamentally opposite visions of liberation. Louis remains tethered to the idea that he can still operate within existing systems, attempting to navigate power structures in a way that does not fully disrupt them. Claudia, on the other hand, becomes increasingly radical in her rejection of these structures, culminating in her decision to kill Lestat.
We're not slaves, maybe mindless accomplices.
No, we're his slaves. And I will free us both.
Their contrasting approaches to power and autonomy mirror the ways in which marginalized communities throughout history have debated different strategies for liberation. Louis represents the more conservative approach, attempting to reconcile his identity within the system, while Claudia embodies the radical impulse to overthrow the existing order entirely. It is fitting then that the first person that Claudia kills is a police officer. Whether intentional or not, this moment underscores her instinctive rejection of oppressive authority and her refusal to play by the rules of a world that has already condemned her to an existence outside of conventional power structures. The 7th episode of the show is one of the most harrowing and symbolic ones in the series.
It's not a trial. It's a stoning.
A stoning. Took the air out of the place with that one.
It's an unsettling detail that Louis, Claudia, and Madeleine have had their Achilles tendons severed. While this serves the narrative function of ensuring their incapacitation, it also recalls the punishments inflicted upon enslaved people in the antebellum South. Plantation owners would maim those who attempted to escape, permanently crippling them as a warning to others. The court constructs a revisionist history of Louis and Lestat's relationship, one that positions Louis as the aggressor and Lestat as his innocent victim.
His eyes sliding down me. I, a vampire, was being hunted.
This reframing draws directly from the long history of black men being falsely accused of preying upon white women, a racialized myth that has fueled some of the most horrific acts of racial violence in American history. Throughout the trial, the audience's revulsion toward Louis' alleged pursuit of Lestat underscores the racial subtext at play. Louis, a black man, is cast as a lecherous predator, echoing the very narratives used to justify the violence of the past. This association between blackness, sexuality, and moral corruption has deep roots in Western cultural consciousness. Celia Deladier, in her introduction to Racism, Misogyny, and the Othello Myth, Interracial Couples from Shakespeare to Spike Lee, highlights how, before black men were lynched for alleged sex with white women were burned alive for alleged sex with the devil described as black. Deladier traces this historical relationship between race, desire, and evil, illustrating how it predates even even the explicit racialized violence of the modern era. This framework has been particularly evident in horror literature, where monstrous figures such as vampires have often been used to embody anxieties about racial and sexual transgression. By staging this trial with this modified racialized version within a genre already rooted in these fears, AMC's Interview with the Vampire, perhaps even inadvertently, calls attention to the persistence of these tropes while simultaneously deconstructing them.
The accused was a troubled man, a failed sugar farmer, a brothel keeper, disreputable, cold, violent.
The subtle racial coding of the trial becomes even more apparent with Madeline. She's the only white member and initially receives a degree of leniency until she chooses to stand by Claudia rather than align herself with the coven. Her fate is ultimately sealed not by any personal crime that she has committed, but by her decision to reject white solidarity in favor of her found family. The fact that Lestat, the white patriarch, is framed as the ultimate victim in this narrative is the most egregious manipulation of all.
And then she turned to Louis and said, abandon Lestat. Come with me to Europe.
Lestat himself is clearly repulsed by the absurdity of the script he's forced to perform. We perceive this even before the revelations of the season's finale. His declaration of Claudia as his blood serves as a small but significant attempt to subvert the coven's framing, emphasizing his connection to her despite their efforts to erase it.
She is my blood. I broke the second law. When you sentence them for their crimes, you sentence me too.
But you manipulated.
Santiago also begins reading Claudia's diaries aloud, deliberately exaggerating her accent to mock her, and then ends the diaries out, ensuring that Claudia's private reflections and traumatic experiences become communal property.
I closed my eyes and waited for the fire to take me. I just prayed it wouldn't hurt too bad. That's when the Black Angel came.
This moment adds new depth to Louis's later decision to heavily censor Claudia's diaries when presenting them to Daniel, particularly in light of his impassioned refusal to allow her story to be exploited. His anger when Daniel suggests that Claudia's exploitation is inevitable is now recontextualized. It's not just a matter of principle. Armand's orchestration of the trial, with its racialized framing of Louis and Claudia's condemnation, can be understood through the lens of assimilation within a white-dominated power structure. Fully aware of the Théâtre des Vampires' overwhelming white European audience, Armand manipulates the spectacle to appeal to their prejudices, ensuring that their outrage is directed precisely where it will be most effective in solidifying a specific narrative. Armand's characterization within the show is particularly compelling when examined through the lens of assimilation and racial identity.
I interrupted. You were praying.
Asr Namozi.
Asr Namozi. What is that? That's not Arabic. What is it? Kazakh? Somewhere in the Crimea? You're not from Dubai. I thought you were a native.
Because unlike Louis, who was born into a community that shared his racial and cultural background, Armand was forcibly removed from his own cultural context at a very young age and thrust into an environment where he was completely severed from his origins. Unlike Louis, who, even in his estrangement and rage, remains deeply connected to Black identity and culture, Armand has had no tether to a collective experience. Instead, his survival has depended on adapting to the structures of power around him, twisting himself into becoming whatever is necessary to maintain control.
My first memory. I'm being run down by slavers in Delhi. My second.
His sense of self is not rooted in justice or community, but in self-preservation.
Where does the bullshit start, Armand, Amadeo?
Arun.
Armand's racial identity is particularly intriguing in the context of the show because despite being canonically a South Asian Muslim, his ethnic background is largely erased in the way his character is presented. The most direct acknowledgement of his racial otherness in the show is a brief moment when he's referred to as a gypsy in a flashback. So unlike Louis, whose blackness is inescapable and central to his story, Armand's otherness exists in a liminal space. He is legible as other enough to unsettle white dominance, yet his ambiguous racial identity allows him to maintain a degree of invisibility. In this way, he becomes a symbol of societal discomfort with fluid identities. Neither fully assimilated nor fully excluded, both a figure of power and a subject of racialized othering. This tension between assimilation and resistance is central to Armand's relationship with Louis. On the surface, Armand appears to offer Louis an alternative model of existence, one where he has seemingly transcended racial and mortal constraints. Yet, beneath this facade lies an unsettling question. Has Armand truly escaped racial boundaries, or has he merely surrendered his identity in order to survive?
Our skin did not attract the same attention it did in America.
Right, because there wasn't any racism in mid-20th century France.
Oh, I
He didn't say that.
I think your Algerian inferiors of the time might disagree.
The notions that Rollins and co. forced race into the narrative is a huge misunderstanding of the vampire genre's historical concerns with otherness. This theme is evident in early cinematic representations such as Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Count Dracula. While Lugosi appears unmistakably white to contemporary audiences today, his Hungarian heritage placed him in a liminal racial category at the time, reflecting broader American anxieties about immigration and whiteness. As Delidier notes, the figure of Dracula fits within Homi Bhabha's concept of the not quite not white, emphasizing the instability of racial categories within American culture. This fear plays into and reinforces the racist trope of the racialized male and his predatory sexual desire that endangers white womanhood and consequently threatens the racial purity of white American society. Many traditionalist viewers argue that fidelity to the source material is the hallmark of a quality adaptation. And while I do understand the sense of loyalty that may develop from a specific text, this perspective disregards the reality that storytelling is a fluid, evolving process that reflects contemporary cultural dialogues. Vampires may be immortal, but they're not timeless. They are continuously reinterpreted to align with the socio-political moment in which they are depicted. Consequently, each adaptation of Interview with a Vampire serves as a lens through which its respective era's concerns with race, sexuality, and power are examined. Adapting a story is an act of cultural translation, one that necessitates both preservation and innovation. For example, there is no preservation nor innovation in the film's adaptation Notorious Unqueering of the novel. This unqueering of the novel was not merely incidental, but part of a broader historical pattern of erasing queer narratives to align with mainstream expectations.
I had lost my wife in childbirth. She and the infant had been buried less than half a year. I would have been happy to join them. I couldn't bear the pain of their loss.
But by stripping Louis of his queerness, the film adaptation confines his turmoil and internal conflict solely to his vampiric existence, severing it from any broader exploration of personal, societal, or intersectional monstrosity. In contrast, AMC's adaptation actively resists this erasure, presenting a richly layered portrayal of shame, despair, and identity that acknowledges the complexities of race, sexuality, gender, and power.
But what if I could give it back to you? Pluck out the pain and give you another life. One you could never imagine.
I can swap this life of shame. Swap it out for a dark gift and a power you can't begin to imagine.
If I leave you here, you die. Or you can be young always, my friend.
Be all the beautiful things you are. And be them without apology.
The various narrative pillars of the novels are still there, but strongly amplified. In Rice's novel, the plantation setting serves primarily as an aesthetic backdrop, rather than an avenue for substantive engagement with slavery realities. The text provides minimal insight into the inner lives of the enslaved characters, portraying them largely as set pieces to emphasize Lewis's moral dilemmas. As Fanon argues in Black Skin, White Masks, Western narratives frequently foreground the existential struggles of colonizers while marginalizing those they actually subjugate. Similarly, in The Wretched of the Earth, Fanon critiques how colonial guilt often manifests as self-loathing rather than genuine accountability, allowing the privileged to process their complicity without meaningful change. In this sense, Rice's novel inadvertently replicates what Fanon describes as the psychological evasiveness of the colonizer, prioritizing Lewis's moral anguish over the systemic violence that he himself perpetuates. AMC's adaptation sidesteps this issue by transforming Louis into a black Creole businessman navigating the racial hierarchies of early 20th century New Orleans. His brothel ownership serves as a pointed commentary on the economic constraints faced by black Americans in the post-slavery South. While no longer legally enslaved, African Americans were often confined to professions that catered to and served white clientele, maintaining structures of exploitation under the guise of economic freedom. This shift in Lewis's racial identity also transforms his relationship with Lestat. In the novel, Lestat wields his power over both Louis and the enslaved people of the plantation, reinforcing a racial and patriarchal hierarchy. Louis even acknowledges Lestat's ability to command the enslaved through his status as a white master, stating, "I told Lestat to calm them, to use all his power as a white master over them, and not to alarm them with horror." Furthermore, the novel explicitly links vampirism to enslavement, with Lestat describing the process of creating new vampires as inherently rooted in subjugation. If you find one or more of them together, it will be for safety only, and one will be the slave of the other, the way you are of me. "I'm not your slave," Louis said to him, but even as he spoke, I realized I'd been his slave all along. That's how vampires increase, through slavery. How else? He asked. Ken Gelder succinctly describes this dynamic, stating, Rice's vampires then reproduce enslavement as a routine matter of self-definition. By reimagining Louis as black, AMC adaptation brings this theme of power into sharper focus. The racial implications of vampiric hierarchy, once metaphorical, are now something we directly engage with in each episode. It directly challenges the Eurocentric framing of vampirism as a supposed equalizer, an idea that Anne Rice's mythology often leaned into, but thematically is completely foreign to the genre itself, by recontextualizing these themes through a modern lens. This approach aligns seamlessly with Lyndon Hutchins' argument that adaptations are not mere imitations but reinterpretations of prior stories, inherently palimpsestic in nature and layering new meanings onto the original text while engaging in a continuous dialogue with its foundational themes.